Shalom, shalom. Greetings to you all in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, wherever you are. It's a blessed day that the Lord has granted us again. And we have to perceive it the way our Father perceives it. That's where success is, the ability to see what is already there. If we misinterpret what is there, that misinterpretation will have an effect, some consequences on us. Why? Because you take that as truth, and once you are convinced of anything as truth and yet it's not, well, whether it's not or not, or it is, it will have power over you. That will create your experiences, and your experiences will be born by your convictions. So the persuasion is called, or the law of persuasion. So whatever that persuades you, so it's significant. Are you really persuaded of the right things, or you are persuaded of destructive, things in your heart? So it's important. The book of Romans, we're going to look at the death, the foundation and the death in death. So, and we have to explain this, and it has to be clear. And I'm telling you, everybody will appreciate, or you will be able to see the mystery of death that you have never seen before. In chapter 6, verse 1, it says, "What shall we say then? All right, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not." So here is so important. Say, what shall we say then? Okay, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? What shall we say then? My. Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. How shall we who died to sin live any longer in it? Or do you not? Now follow what this writer is saying, because he's going to talk about a lot about death, and he's going to talk about death a lot here. So let us focus and say, certainly not. How shall we who died to sin? Okay, so there is something called dying to sin. Okay, so now you begin to understand that death has to be understood in its context. So dying to sin is so precious. So precious is the death of his saints. So there's a certain death which is a prerequisite. In fact, it's a must for every person who is going to be liberated from the tyranny of sin. Now, do you realize that he's saying that what shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. How shall we who died to sin? Okay, so you see, he's saying that it takes death for a man to be free from sin. This is profound. It takes death for a man to be free from sin. So sin cannot be dealt with by living mortal men. No mortal man will be able to defeat or overcome sin, because sin was introduced in the world by one man. Because in the previous chapter of this book, Romans, we see that sin introduced death. All right? And so he's saying that then there is a way out of sin. The way out of sin is going to be death. So death is the answer to sin, because sin cannot be taken away by the efforts of men, by the fight that people put to that. It will not change until it is over. It is death. Only death can deal with sin. All right, that's when you are free. All right, so in Romans chapter 5, we see the book of Romans reveals to us the death introduced in the world. In chapter 5, verse 12, I'm going to read here so that I may come back on chapter 6. It says, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men. So I want you to say, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world. So sin entered the world. You see now? Sin entered in the world. And death through sin. So, in fact, sin has its own death. All right? So, sin was introduced in the world, and sin brought in death. So, there's that death which was brought by sin is that evil death. All right? And this evil death is not what I'm talking about. In fact, I'm showing you the way out, because the moment you are free from sin through another kind of death, because you are not talking about the death that Adam introduced in the world. You cannot be free from sin because you died the death of Adam. But you can be free from sin because of the death of Christ. And so we have to understand this death of Jesus Christ. And therefore, we can appreciate what the writer is saying. Precious is the death of the saints. Now, this is a prophet who was prophesying about the death that was to come. And the death which was to liberate people was the death of Jesus Christ. So as he's speaking here, he's saying, in fact, sin brought in death. And death reigned, and was reigning because sin was there. So if you want to destroy death, you first destroy the mother of death, which is sin. Okay? So we go back in Romans chapter 6. You see, in Romans chapter 6, what shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. How shall we who died to sin live any longer in it? My goodness. So I think that many people never appreciated dying to sin, never understood dying to sin. Because it says if you have died to sin, you cannot live any longer in it. It's practically impossible. Let us put it this way, because I know, of course, the context here, but let me bring it this way. Suppose, all right, a man was in debt and a lot of money, he owed a lot of money somebody or something or someone, and then the law will follow or pursue or will demand the payment as long as this man exists or lives. But now let us suppose that this man dies and he's no more. Whom shall pay? Who shall pay? This loan shall be paid by who? It's just an example, because the one who is supposed to pay is no more. Therefore, his death, the death of this man, has liberated him from that debt. Now, I'm not saying this is just a good example. It's just an example, because if he doesn't pay and he just runs away, that he's running away with evil. And I'm not saying that people should not pay. I'm saying that if the person is no more, you cannot condemn this person anymore. You can't pursue this person. All right? He cannot be in debt anymore because it's not there. All right? Let me put it again in a different way. A person used to live in a certain place. A person used to live in a certain house. A person used to live in a certain city. A person used to work somewhere. And so time comes and that person is no more in that place. Or maybe they have gone into another country, they shifted and went into a far country. And so they are no longer working where they used to work. They are no longer saying what they used to say. So this is exactly what he's saying. He says, certainly not, how shall we who died to sin? So let us say that this person died. If this person died and used to work in a certain institution, he is no more. And therefore he cannot work there anymore. The reason being, he has died. Okay? So I found that people do not understand the A, therefore they don't understand B. All right? So they are saying we can't live in sin anymore. Yes, but that is when we have died. So before we talk about victory over sin, before we talk about victory, separation from sin, oh mama, do you realize the importance of death? That we shouldn't be discussing freedom without discussing death. And probably this is one of the issues that have taken place, that have crippled many. In their understanding, they never saw the power of death in liberating and separating people from death, from sin forever. So death is so important that will set you free from anything. Okay, let us have an example of this ordinary death. When a person passes away, that means they are no longer, all right? And they also have the death certificate. People go and get the death certificate of that person because it's died and it's been buried. It's no more. All right, as far as the physical realm is concerned, that's what I'm saying. Or what they used to do, the physical realm, they are saying, because that doesn't mean they are no more. They are actually more alive than we think, because though we don't see them physically, but they are alive, because man is not a physical body. Man is more than a physical body. It's a spirit. Lives in the soul, has a soul, and lives in the body. So just the cessation of the body does not mean death. So death in that concept, in that context, is different. So I'm not talking about all that. I'm just giving an example of a person who used to work somewhere, who used to stay somewhere, and then he passes away. And the moment he's not there, all right, they cannot work there anymore. So this is why he's saying, how, all right, what does it even make sense? That certainly not, how shall we who died, if you died, how can you live any longer in a place where you used to live and yet you died? Do you get it? That's how clear it is. So he says, wait, all you people were talking about, freedom, with victory over sin. He said, do you realize that the answer to sin is death? And many people have never understood the place of death in as far as their liberation, their freedom is concerned. This is important. So again, you see why the prophet will say, precious is the death of his saints. Do you see how precious this death is? Because it's going to set you free from sin. If sin was introduced through one man, so sin can be taken away by another man, but through his death, it is taken away. So death is important to set you free. You see now the preciousness of death? Very important. Shalom. Shalom.